Hello, everyone, to another Field Engineer Channel talk. I have with me today Charlie Apps, that you know very well, and Jerome Varvaro, whom we know as Jerry. We have done introductions and interviews in previous videos, and today this is our first talk as a trio, the three of us. We want to tackle some topics that would be of interest to field engineers. And today we thought of talking about a career track for the field engineers, how they try to advance in their careers, and the roles of managers in helping them advance in their careers using their best talents. And so we are here today to do that. Charlie, Jerry, thank you for your time today, and I guess we can get started. So let's start with you, Jerry. Maybe you can give us an idea about your experience with career track for yourself, how you have done it, advancing in your career, and then we can go into, as a manager, how you really facilitate that kind of advancement for your people.
Well, it's important to engage the employees on a regular basis to have a performance plan for the year. And that's the first step. It's if you outline a performance plan, and that would include potentially trainings and, equipment qualifications, and see how well that person does as far as sticking to that plan. Part of being a field engineer is also the business acumen, right? Because especially a younger field engineer, they're going to be out in the field acting autonomously at some point, right? Managing expense reports and inventory and paperwork and so forth, and the customer experience. So there's quite a bit of non-technical soft skills that are required, and being a self-starter and being able to manage oneself is critical. And I think those people that really show a high degree of proficiency as far as going away from the technical side, right? To be able to manage a situation, to manage the customer relationship, to manage all the business aspects. We have that as part of our performance reviews. How good is your administrative skills, right? Are you prone to errors on your paperwork? But all these things start to show the manager like a complete package of somebody that really has a holistic view and capability for the role, and that leads to advancement later on. And for me, that's how it went. I didn't, some engineers may focus, I'm really good technically, why do I have to worry about inventory control? Well, okay, because that's part of the job. But, people that understand that tend to gravitate into management roles because they can kind of see that big picture beyond just the technology component of being a field engineer. I think maybe that would be a good starting point to really.
Yeah, you make good points, and you're right. Basically, the first step for a field engineer is to prove themselves capable. And they are so much out there on their own that they live in their own sphere with their customers, and they manage everything that is needed by a customer, and they need to fix the customer as much as they need to fix the equipment. Charlie, what has been your experience with this?
Yeah, so I think it's Jerry's raised some really good points there. The ability to focus in on, laser focus in on customer problems and fix that's important. But to be able to step back and say, okay, what's the bigger business picture here? One thing that I like to see in my teams is to recognize that they advocate for their customers. They're on their customer side. They're there to fix the customer, as we say, but also understand that you are working for a business, and so you need to look after the business as well. You don't want to be burning. You could advocate for a customer too much and reveal some things that you really want to keep, business side of the customer. So looking out for that understanding that you've got to fulfill those two roles. Looking at my personal path, I think I early on in my career I had to be very independent. I was the only engineer this side of the pond, so if there was a problem in the morning, I didn't have 24-hour support, so I had to be as independent as possible. I think one of the other skills is understanding when to call for help. As a manager, I do want the engineers to call for help at the appropriate time. And that's the skill set I really look for, because I don't want someone, every time they have a problem, call for help. I'd like you to have a go, but know that you're not getting yourself into too much trouble or into too much depth. And that judgment factor is, I think, really key. So you're looking for people to be managers who make good, sound judgment based on the facts in front of them.
Right. And that's a good point, because as field engineers, we tend to feel like it's on us. We are there in front of the customer. It is on us to fix the problem. And we spend a long time sometimes without reaching a conclusion. But the trick here is for the field engineer to think that I don't need to play the hero. I have colleagues, I have maybe more experienced colleagues who can help with the situation, and I can, involve them in the problem. Jerry, you mentioned something that flagged something in my mind. You mentioned performance reviews and maybe development plans for the field engineer. How have you gone about that with your teams? When you sit down with them and do the performance review and try to set maybe a development plan for that person, if that person is maybe a good candidate for a succession planning, whether it is, specialization in technical expertise, or maybe as the next in line for promotion to management. How have you gone about that?
Well, it's interesting. And just to circle back on the previous points, when somebody needs to know when to pull that ripcord and say, you know what, I need help. If you go over that line, you could wind up with a customer escalation because things have gotten too far before you've pulled the ripcord. However, that is a good measurement, though. When I see engineers really trying to manage that situation as best they can with what they have and take ownership, they stand out. Those guys stand out as the potential future managers, because you could see how much, they didn't just kind of throw it over the wall at somebody else. They really tried to own the whole incident. But with regards to career planning, we do have some tools, some portals that we use, which makes it a little easier. So you can outline objectives for somebody for the year, beyond just the core set of objectives of timely completion of jobs, quality, customer satisfaction ratings. It's also something that you're going to achieve in this year. And then watching people, move toward that goal, and are they successful? And at the same time, they're then building up their skills and capabilities, and you're able to watch them on that journey. And then we also have kind of a roadmap within the team. I'm always willing to support somebody who wants to leave the department and move into engineering or product management, but we also want to create a career journey within our teams to show where it's possible to move within service as a field engineer beyond the field service engineer role, and how to and then once people start to develop an idea of what they want to go after, because not everybody should be a manager, okay? It's not the end all for everybody. There are expert promotions you can do that achieve the same goal of recognition and compensation versus just being a manager. And that's very clear. So you have to differentiate, is this somebody who's going to take an expert career path or a managerial career path? And then once you've developed that with the employee and they can see that goal, then, now you can create the road to get there for them. And then it becomes clearer for them on how they get there. It's, and then when you have things like that, it becomes more, the goals are quantitative, right? They're not more just subjective. They know what they're working toward.
Right, right. Charlie, how has been your experience with that?
Again, there's lots in there. I think the point is well made. People, a lot of particularly less experienced field teams look at, okay, well, natural progression is looking up. Okay, there's a people manager, and I think one point to make actually is. Of course, there's overlap of skill set, but being the individual hero and fixing something technically and developing a good relationship with a few customers, let's say, is a very different beast to managing a whole team. And you may not have close relationship with customers. You may get a lot of the problems and the escalations that land on you, and fixing them directly is not exactly what you do. And so that transition from being the go-to person as a field engineer, once you start to gain an experience and you're recognized of, oh, when we've got a big problem, we'll call so and so, to then going beyond that and up to the management level, and now people still want to call you in. I think it's a very tough transition period when you're seen as a super engineer through to they're the manager, we can't really bug them with this. So that transition is actually quite a difficult thing for individuals to. It's not difficult to handle, but it can be one of the challenges from making that transition.
Right. And we have maybe mentioned this in a previous talk where we mentioned that going from a field engineer to supervisor or manager, and maybe more as a manager, is sometimes tricky because the team had always seen that person as a colleague who fixes. And now that person is promoted to management. In his mind, he is still the fixer. He's still the one repairing, while he needs to step back and really focus on managing the team. And this is where his or her manager can coach that person and coach the team about the new reality and how they can deal with this. So it's a challenge for sure, and it's really teamwork to really advance someone like this and help them succeed in their new role. Also, as managers, what I have seen is some companies talk about succession planning, but they don't have a clear plan how to find the right candidate and how to prepare that candidate. I had someone come to me recently talking to me about that. He was identified as next in line to succeed his or her manager at one point in time. I said, that's great. So you have been identified, but what is the plan? How are you going to be prepared? Is there something that the manager will give you as small projects for you to start tapping into a little bit into that role to prepare you, engage you on how you are doing and to coach you? So I personally haven't seen companies that have a clear plan as to how prepare for succession. I don't know in your case, Jerry, what has been your experience?
Well, recently, in the last few years, we've done something called talent talks, where all the managers in a team will evaluate their employees in a grid, high impact, their performance is on par. Can they expand beyond their role? Can they expand within their role? And then kind of we sit on a panel and we kind of look at each manager's looks like a SWOT analysis kind of a thing, right? It's a grid, and then when you see the people that are identified as people that can perform beyond their role, and then especially when you talk about succession, so important, right? Because if you lose a key player in your organization, it could create upheaval, right? And it depends. And I've said years ago, I never want to be in that position again. I want to have a fault tolerant team structure that can withstand that, because people are going to come and go. You have to be used to that. You can't pretend that you have no turnover, right? So you have to develop these succession plans. And then once you've identified the individuals, then you're absolutely right. You have to then prepare them. You have to see what the gaps are in their training and knowledge, and then work out a plan to fill those gaps so they can be ready. Absolutely the case. But you have to do that gap assessment.
Yeah. Well, one thing I was going to say, actually, in terms of that gap assessment and the gaps, one thing that I've seen through my career is making sure that those people who are moving up have an opportunity to see other parts of the business. And one way to do that might be through secondments into other parts of the business, because when you're managing, all of a sudden you are dealing beyond service. You are dealing potentially with sales. You're dealing with other business units, and if you've not had that exposure, again, that can be jarring, and that can if you don't have that, then you may not be as successful as you would otherwise have been. So I think identifying gaps, and then how do you then fill those knowledge gaps, I think is a challenge, but a really important one, to make sure that you're setting yourself up or your employees up for success when you make that transition from a field engineer to a field manager.
Right.
That's absolutely right. You have to expose them. It's not just a function of training, but you have to give them some exposure to the role that they're preparing for. And that can be difficult with schedules and things like that, right?
Right. But that's the best opportunity, because you are there. One day you might win the lottery and say, bye-bye, I'm done here, I'm taking my retirement. And then they are left without a good successor. But I think what the point that we're making so far is that it's always the right time to work with that potential successor and intentionally make time to coach that person and watch how they are making decisions and the little projects that we give them, and help them grow into a manager role. So when the time comes, depending on the size of the companies, sometimes also how many opportunities do they have, when the right time comes, these people would be ready to take on their new role. Now, if we talk about the other side, which is maybe growing into a technical specialist, if we can call it that way, because growing in a role and advancing is not always necessarily about moving up to management. It could be becoming an expert, subject expert, right? Someone who would be a technical expert and go-to person. I don't know if you have seen this in the organizations where you worked. Feel free to jump in, Charlie or Jerry, maybe to comment more on that role versus management.
Yeah, so in my previous experience, I've had someone who really wanted to be a people manager, and they did it, and then very quickly realized and had the I thought they were pretty brave to come out and say, this isn't for me, and to then take a step back, and we looked at it and go and said, okay, maybe actually a technical expert is the right way for you to go. So and then you present them as, obviously there's training, there's education that then goes into that, but then they are presented to your broader organization of escalations for this particular issue or this particular product or whatever it may be. Buck stops with them, or they are linked to the manufacturing base or whatever it may be. So making sure that they have the exposure, and again, it's about support and making sure that you're putting in the support to make sure that they can be successful. But I think it's a difficult one if someone wants to be a people manager, and I think again it's our job as coaches, as leaders, to help identify is this the right thing before they get too fixed on this mindset. There are alternatives to just being a people manager. So I think there's plenty of onus on current managers to do that.
No, I agree. I think there's it's not always a bowl of cherries, and I've had similar instances where people have stepped away from management. I was in the other role. I became more technical as an engineer, and I said, you know what, I miss the managing, because I was a team lead and a supervisor, and then I walked away for a little while to get back in the technical end, and I said, I need to have more influence or more impact. But the expert roles are equally critical to any organization, right? Some people don't want to, at the end of the day, manage in the people realm, or maybe they can't. They don't have the interpersonal skills, and that's no problem. We look at soft skills that qualify an engineer, and we've leveled our engineers level 1, 2, 3, so you can grow, because some people love the field. They want to stay in the field. They want to just have some movement within that world, right? So it could be a product champion, like you mentioned, somebody who really masters a particular product. I've seen engineers write their own troubleshooting guides that they're sharing with other members on their team. And who can be a site lead when you have a job that requires, 3 or 4 field engineers? Who's going to be the one, setting up the workflows? And so there's so many aspects on the expert side that can be very fulfilling, right? And we just have to be honest with the reality of both worlds and where somebody best fits.
Right. And I think this is where the talent of the manager kicks in, because you get to know your team very well. You get to know the strengths and weaknesses of each and every one on your team. And you kind of see where they fit depending also on the need of the business. Is that person really going in the direction of being an expert, and I need an expert because that product is complex and I need a liaison maybe with the manufacturers to facilitate how we attack or deal with complex service problems? Or at this point, do I need someone who focuses more on managing installation projects? Some companies have teams dedicated to installing new equipment, and they have engineers dedicated for that. So again, it depends on the size of the companies. Any other aspects you can think of for the advancement of field engineers in their careers?
Well, one thing came to mind is that's great if the three of us are your manager and we have all these processes in place. But what if the field engineers in an organization where the management may be not proactive?
Yeah.
So looking at the broad audience, right? How can you as a field engineer drive that change? And one thing is reaching out. I have people do that all the time. People come to me, hey, can I speak to you? My door is always open, but sometimes you have to have, if you're the employer, you need to open it. You need to kind of, create the crack and say, and raise your hand and say, look, I want to do more. I want to stay with this organization. I want to develop, and here's things that interest me. How can I achieve that? So sometimes you have to challenge your manager a little bit, because
True.
not every organization has the systems or the workflows in place, right? And that's fine. Some organizations are at different stages of development. So it's up to the employee to kind of take that ownership. It's always not going to come to you, is what I'm saying, right? So raise your hand and be and let people know what your intentions are.
Agreed.
Absolutely.
Charlie, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that's a really valid point. It's not something that we've explored in this conversation, but a lot of the advancement, don't expect it to come to you. Go off. If in your mind I want to do more, then by all means go after it and chase it. Have the conversation with your manager, and if you don't feel as though you're getting support, seek other people who you respect in terms of leadership, and have conversations. What can I do? So I think that's a very good message to maybe wrap up the conversation on.
Yeah, no, I think we tackled a lot in these few minutes. Again, maybe we touched upon only some tip of icebergs that we can continue on in future talks. So I think we can wrap up here. Jerry, Charlie, thank you very much for your time. I think this was a good discussion, and there will be future ones. So I encourage all our followers to subscribe so that they know about new talks and can watch them either on YouTube or even on podcasts, because that could be more practical for them. So see you on the next talk.
Thanks very much.
Thanks, guys.